Sitting in a vineyard on the outskirts of Montpellier, the sun bouncing off his head, there is not one part of Richard Cockerill that wishes he was back in England. Does he miss it? No. Cockerill's contract with the RFU expired at the end of June, 3 months after the Six Nations. I joined the Mammals Club, he says enthusiastically, breaking into a toothy grin. Middle-aged men in lycra. I don't have to worry about the rain if I take my bike out here. Since the last test against Ireland, he spent his time cycling the east coast of Scotland and preparing to move to the south of France for his new coaching role. He stepped down on his own terms, accepting a 3-year offer from Montpellier, and carried out project work for Steve Borthwick in the final weeks of his contract. As far as middle-aged outsiders go, there is no one with a more recent insight into the workings of England's World Cup preparations, ahead of next week's warm-up game in Wales. Insight no one. England's scrum is no longer a liability. One of the projects Steve gave me was to look at our scrum. It went from being the worst in the autumn to statistically the best in the Six Nations. Steve asked me to look at how we did it. What were the good things? What could we do better? Before the Six Nations, we spoke to Wayne Barnes and referees around the world about their perceptions of our scrum. Barnesy said, "They don't like you at all. Every time there's a meeting it's all about how poorly we set up. Over. Lean or don't listen." That was the reality, so how could we change it? It doesn't matter what we think, it matters what the referees think. What do you want? Okay, fine, we'll give you that. We sent the referees clips of us training rather than clips of the opposition doing something we don't like. Things had to change, so we changed things. A scrum's a scrum. What happens is the sports science comes in, everyone's looking for a different edge, but you can forget about the simple things. Everybody's trying to reinvent everything all the time, but it's not a sanitized thing where you put your foot here and bind there. Bind well, bend over, push. It's about mentality and relationships. All the players worked hard at it. Insight no 2, England lacked depth. In his first few weeks with Montpellier, kicking off their intense preseason camp, Cockerill's entry has been bombarded with CVs of English players. 3 Premiership clubs went bust last season as the domestic game hit an all-time low. Despite being backed by billionaire owner Moht Altred, the club are having to turn down English talent because they have to hit strict quotas on the number of French players. The system has resulted in a flourishing French national team, and Cockerill believes England are missing a trick. Being here for a short time, you look at the squads and you've got to have 16 or 17 players that are French GIF qualified. You're only picking 6 foreigners. Here, if you don't get your quota, you start the season with -6 points and a heavy fine. That's been huge for the French team because they're producing a strength and depth that England don't have at the moment. Coaching England is a very difficult job. The expectation is very high. People say you've got the most players to pick from. At one point, when we were looking at centers across the 12 Premiership teams, only 6 out of the 24 centers were English qualified. The England team isn't the priority of a club coach. English players are expensive and they're away for long periods of time. Yes, the Premiership is a good spectacle, but the English depth charts in certain positions aren't as deep as you think they are. If Premiership clubs had to pick 16 or 17 English qualified players every week, then things might be different. Insight no 3, life is much more predictable under Borthwick. Cockerill was the only coach to work under both Eddie Jones and Borthwick. After Jones was sacked, Cockerill took on the role of head coach on an interim basis to fill the void. 0 losses, he jokes, played none, won none. Life in camp changed drastically under Borthwick, becoming much more predictable on and off the field. Do not expect too many deviations from the kick-heavy game that Borthwick fostered at Leicester Tigers. Eddie's Eddie. You'd wake up in the morning and there would be 10 WhatsApps with clips about something. I think my earliest email was 2:50 a.m. Eddie would do anything to win. He loves a glass of wine and is hard on his coaching staff. You could win on Saturday and the meeting on Monday would be horrific, and you could lose and it would be great. Steve's very different. He's more methodical. If you win, you turn up on Monday and he's the same as he would be if you'd had a good beating by France. There's a measured view the whole time. Why did it happen? How do we make it better? Very methodical and very present in controlling his feelings. Everything is pretty much data-driven with Steve. All of the meetings are very well planned and backed up with stats. 1,000 plus kicking meters, stopping them running, turnovers, penalties. If you kick the ball more than them, if you kick it down the other end, chase really hard and tackle them in their third of the field, then you're probably going to win more than you lose. Insight no 4, Billy Vunipola's ball carrying could be key. Borthwick failed to provide a quick fix in his first Six Nations campaign, finishing fourth after defeats by Scotland, France and Ireland. They failed to win collisions and giant No. 8 Billy Vunipola was nowhere to be seen, overlooked by the selectors. Vunipola is back in camp and could feature in next week's opening warm-up game against Wales as he returns from knee surgery. His power could be a game changer. Is the performance more important than the result in the warm-up games? Probably. It's about forming some combinations and getting your senior players ready, making sure guys like Maro Itoje and Courtney Lawes are fit and in form. The front five probably picks itself. Ellis Genge, Jamie George, Kyle Sinclair, Maro Itoje. George Martin will push if Ollie Chessum isn't ready. I don't know who will be picked at 8, but personally I would go with Billy if he's on form, with Tom Curry at 7 and Courtney at 6. Apart from Genge, who carries the hard, there's not many who are winning collisions in the forward pack. Courtney carries well, but if you look at other top teams, they've got multiple guys that can do some damage. Alex Dombrant is a great 8 who runs good lines, but is he going to run over someone like Gregory Aldrit? He's a good player, but it needs to be a certain type of game for him. England will want to play territory and they'll want to be physical. We've had a 4-year cycle and we're not really sure on certain positions where we probably should be. That's a fault from the last regime, I suppose. You could pull 10-12 out of a hat. Are they going to start Marcus Smith at 10? He's a fantastic player and an awesome lad, but I wouldn't have thought so. I would go Owen Farrell, Manu Tuilagi and Ollie Lawrence for their power. It's easy when you don't actually have to pick it. Alisana Tuilagi on one wing, Nikki Ganiva on the other and Josh Tuisova at fullback. Joking aside, they need some out-and-out pace. Maybe Henry Arundel can push for a starting place. England have got a lot of good players, but they need someone to really stand out. Insight No. 5, lopsided draw makes England contenders. England are 10/1. Outsiders to win the World Cup despite being placed on the easy side of the fixture list. They will avoid France, Ireland, New Zealand and South Africa in the opening rounds as a result of the outdated pool draw. Expectations are low, but Cockerill expects the team to progress deep into the competition. Ultimately, England are building for the next cycle, but I think they'll win their pool in the quarter-final. They're more than good enough to beat Wales, Fiji or Australia in a quarter-final. Then you get to a semi-final and all bets are off. Steve's a smart enough coach to know that he's probably got to be able to play more than one way. If you try and outplay New Zealand, they're probably better than us. If they go out to physically dominate South Africa, they're probably not going to win. On their day they can probably physically dominate New Zealand or outplay South Africa? I think so. Steve's got a good preseason with them now, and a fit, well-drilled England team is good enough to upset one of the top 4. They're outsiders, you're not going to put your house on it, but you just have to look at the other side of the draw. Anything can happen.